So we have reached a point here on the Matt Barrie Show, ESPN College Football YouTube channel, on our Sunday recaps with Paul Finebaum and me that, well, October's over and we are embarking on the first college football playoff rankings. We are in the month of November in college football, the month you remember. Paul, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. And we have reached this point. And so overarching opinion on Saturday as it relates to what we're about to see over the last month of the season?
Well, I think the treetop was the Big 12, Matt, and there's no way to scrub away the stench of that loss. As great as it was for Lance Leipold, and I think everybody's a fan of his and that program. It was a bitter pill because you can conjure up anything you want now, but it's going to be very difficult for the Big 12 to factor if things don't just go completely chaotic, which they might. That was certainly the headline from Saturday. Georgia, beating Florida, I think, is going to be interpreted many, many ways. I mean, I think, can we now accept that Florida really isn't really very good? I mean, their wins are against Tennessee at home, which is good. But beyond that, they have a win over South Carolina, which is really bad.
Yeah, there were two things that I took away from a Saturday where, I mean, if it's any indication that chaos is coming, we saw chaos arrive Saturday with the Oklahoma loss. And there's twofold with that, Paul. There's one, the Big 12 now is in jeopardy because going in, and we've said this on the recap here for the last 2 months, that the Big 12 didn't have many ranked teams. So they couldn't afford to have one of the Big Two go down, the Big Two being Oklahoma and Texas. Texas obviously had gone down to Oklahoma, but now, the Big 12 needed Oklahoma to win out, so that if there is a rematch in the Big 12 and Texas gets that, then maybe you're talking about the Big 12 champion getting to the playoff. But I'll take it one step further with another conference. A loss that really hurt in the wee hours of the night was Oregon State, ranked 11th, going down to Arizona, because we see this out of the Pac-12 all the time. They just beat each other up. Yeah. And now you can't have – it's down to Oregon and Washington. That's it. And Washington keeps living dangerously. And I'm of the opinion that if you keep living dangerously, a loss will find you. And so here we sit before the month of November, the college football playoff rankings. Pac-12 and Big 12 need to be really, really careful.
Yeah. And I just want to send out this warning. I hope everybody watches, and good for them. But let's not get carried away here. There'll be a lot of hot takes, a lot of overreaction. Tennessee was number one last year. Didn't make a bit of difference. They lost twice. And whether it's Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, I don't think it really matters a whole lot.
It's a TV show. I mean, at the root of it, it's a TV show to at least. Here's what I'll say about the first rankings, Paul. What they do is they at least give us a crack in the window of the minds of the committee of how they're going to do this the rest of the way. I firmly believe that Ohio State is going to be number one come Tuesday because of the two tests that they have. I think Florida State's probably going to be number two. I could see Georgia being number three, and I could see Michigan being number four, and both Pac-12 teams 5 and 6. And that's fine. But you're right. People are going to yell and scream about it when in the grand scheme of things, it's going to take care of itself in the next 3 weeks.
Yeah. And the thing I don't like, Matt, and I know you don't, is all of a sudden people just start, college football season's here. Let's see who's number one. It's a little bit of, and I won't mention any of the shows who will be doing that, but you're going to get a lot of that, which is fine. But we both have been down this road for too many years to really get. I used to get upset. I used to sit there on Tuesday and Wednesday with you and other places and this is how do these people know what they're doing? Well, it doesn't really matter. They'll figure it out. The Big Ten is really where the action is Tuesday night. And if you're right, and you probably are, they'll value the Big Ten upper echelon, although, count me as not being like really that excited by the fact that Ohio State has beaten who they beaten? Penn State. I mean,
Notre
great.
Dame, yeah.
I mean, Notre Dame is looking like a pretty good team right now. I give them that. And that game was at Notre Dame, but the Penn State game at home, so what?
I have such a hard time with the Big Ten because I believe that Ohio State and Michigan are elite. I think Michigan is the most dominant team in the country. They have their schedule. It is what it is. It's just not good. My problem with the Big Ten, Paul, is that it really is Michigan and Ohio State and maybe 40% of Penn State. I mean, the Penn State team that had to beat Indiana in the last minute and a half or so of the game. I mean, you're telling me that's an elite.
No, they're not.
So the Big Ten, it always fascinates me that I think top to bottom, the Big Ten of the Power Five is the weakest, yet they are going to have two teams come playoff ranking number one, likely in the top four.
They are, and I think it's because those two are so good, and therefore we make believe the Penn State games and games like that are significant. I mean, Penn State's is a good team, but we buried Penn State last week, and they still have the same coach, and that's the problem.
My apologies for my autoplay here on the real-time laptop of yesterday's Arizona State's big win over Washington State. I know you want to dive into that. I do want to
that happened.
Let's dive into the cocktail party for a minute. I have completely changed my tune on Georgia in this way, Paul. It's not that I didn't think that they were really good. It's that I thought a lot of the ranking that they were given this season was predicated on the last 2 years of success when most of that team went off to the NFL. And I thought that this year's team needed to prove that they were their own individual dominant team. Yesterday, for me, changed my mind on Georgia because of no Brock Bowers in a big rivalry game and a grow-up game for Carson Beck. So whatever you want to attach to the Georgia Bulldogs right here, right now, I am completely in on them because I needed to see something with a little bit of adversity. We saw that, and they still whooped Florida. They're as dominant as they ever were.
Well, here's what impresses me about Georgia. They've had two games that I would call really, big according to the hype going in. The Kentucky game, which, pardon the laughter, that really wasn't very big, but it seemed like it. And they delivered, and they did it again. And I think that shows a good team. We were talking to Kirby Smart prior to the game in Jacksonville, and he said the most important thing in this game is momentum. And you saw that momentum build quickly, and it was over. It was suffocating. And I think if you look at Sports Center this morning and you see the score, Florida hung in there. No, they didn't.
No.
They were down 36-7. They got a couple of garbage touchdowns when Kirby put his kids and his nephew and nieces in, and it was just 23 points versus 29. It was very misleading score. It was an absolute behind the barn ass kicking.
Yeah, and Georgia now again. I think there were some people waiting to see what's left to be said about what they did this weekend. Here's something with Georgia, though. The schedule that we all looked at, we're like, this is the easiest road to Atlanta of all time. Missouri next week, that's going to be a really, really tough game. And then Ole Miss. So there are two games coming up because Ole Miss, again, we love Lane Kiffin. We love what he's built, but we still have to reserve judgment on them until we see them in another big game. But Georgia's got 2 weeks ahead of them, Paul, but we're going to learn a lot about who they are.
And not to just add one more to the pie, but assuming they survive that, then they go to Knoxville, which I don't know what to make out of that game yet.
Yeah, who are they?
Because Tennessee still has to deal with Missouri and a few other foes. So, but it's still there's something eerie about late November in Knoxville. Assuming you're trying to get yourself to Atlanta, which they probably will have already punched the ticket by then. But yeah, so Missouri is a mystery. I have friends in the industry, analysts who say Missouri is not that great. I happen to think they're good. I'm impressed with what Eli Drinkwitz is doing, but so far, they have a nice win against Kentucky in Lexington. I think a lot of people will have wins against Kentucky and Lexington by the end of this year. And they beat Kansas State on a 61-yard field goal.
And they were a shootout away with LSU. I mean, they could have won that game.
Yeah, you're right. So I mean, we're talking about a game. I think they had a double-digit lead against
14-point lead, 13 or 14-point lead. Yeah.
I mean, we're talking. This could have been undefeateds here. It wasn't far from being the game of the day. It isn't, but it wasn't far from it.
Yeah, and when you look at Tennessee, I don't know what they are yet. And I don't know how that's possible through 8 games. Because Joe Milton, I mean, Jesse Palmer said on the broadcast a number of times last night, and he was right. There are plays and throws where Joe Milton makes a throw, and you're like, oh my God, this guy is
Yeah.
a specimen of a quarterback. Then there's throws where he can't even keep it in the stadium.
Yeah.
And then they've got 2 good running backs. Sometimes the defense shows up. Like last year, I could pin Tennessee. I could say Hendon Hooker. I could say Jalen Hyatt, and I could say they're an explosive team. I don't know what they are at this stage in the season, and I think that's okay.
Well, what they did was save their season against Kentucky, though, because that was a game they could have lost, and they were staring at 7-5 or 8-4 had they lost that game. Now they've got 2 games that are the Georgia game they'll be an underdog, and the Missouri game they'll be an underdog.
Let's talk. We briefly touched on the Big Ten. I want to circle back to the Michigan story because every day something new comes out about this sign stealing scandal that is going on or allegedly going on in Ann Arbor. I don't know what to make of it big picture because I think the NCAA probably doesn't like how Jim Harbaugh and Michigan have handled some of the stuff in the past with the alleged recruiting violations during COVID. I think we could sit here and all agree that everyone steals signs. I know there are rules about advanced doing it. I know there are rules about technology, but here's what I'm getting at with this, Paul. It is human nature now for everyone, a la Houston Astros and that big thing, to point at Michigan and say, see, they're not legit. They're not, but I wonder if the committee is going to do this over the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Well, I think you just nailed what is the subplot of Tuesday night, and the committee chair will be asked about it, and they've already got the typed up answer, and I doubt it's going to tell us anything we don't already know. But as far as Michigan, this is a very sleazy, disgusting story. There are leaks. There are leaks up there coming out left and right, and everyone makes the school look worse. That's good. That's on one ledger. But we're also talking about a time in college football when people shrug their shoulders about everything because of NIL, because of the portal, because of all the things that are going on. And all I'm interested now is, can any of this stick? Does any of this really matter? And quite frankly, I don't think it does. I don't think any of this is going to stick to Jim Harbaugh. I don't think it's going to influence or impact the college football playoff. And Matt, that's what we're interested in. Does Michigan have a rogue staffer? Very possibly. Will the university, distance themselves from him? Yes. Will Jim Harbaugh get dinged? Yes. But the ultimate question at Michigan is how lockstep is the university with Harbaugh? You got a fairly new president, who, by the way, I think he announced Jim Harbaugh's extension on his own Twitter about a year ago, but he still hasn't, they haven't solidified that contract yet. You've got a tense relationship between Ward Manuel, the AD, and Jim Harbaugh, but that's understandable. I think any AD would have a tense relationship with Jim Harbaugh. And, from here, I think he'll survive this as far as the CFP. And then I believe he'll very quickly and dramatically try to get out of there. Now, does Jim Harbaugh get an NFL job? I don't know. I don't. I'm not the host of one of these NFL shows. I'm not an insider. I'm sure he'll try though.
He's tried every year. I mean, he was interviewing with the Vikings on recruiting day last year. And so that's been one of the things where you look at, you say, well, how all in is Jim Harbaugh if he's flirting with the NFL every year? There are many people that think this is the thing that'll eventually chase him out of college football. But the right here, right now is that he's got a very dominant football team. They factor in to the college football playoff rankings come Tuesday. I want to wrap it up in the ACC because we were doing it on College Football Final last night. Clemson, 4-4 for the first time since 2010. And this league that was once dominated by a team, Paul, that could hang with the best in the SEC.
Everybody.
They're at the bottom. And this league is Florida State now and some other nice stories hanging on.
The saddest story in college football this year is Dabo Swinney and Clemson. And Matt, there's not a single person outside of that area code who is feeling sorry. This is a coach who has thumbed his nose at the norms of where we are today. I'm not saying the traditions, I'm saying where the game is. And he has made countless mistakes, and it's now blowing up. And I think the real question for Dabo Swinney and Clemson is, can he get it back? I mean, these are not easy things to get back. Nebraska has been in the wilderness for 25 years. Other programs have been out there, and it's very possible that the program, along with Alabama, of the last 10 years in college football may be done. I mean, forget the dynasty thing done. That's not even, you can't even say that anymore. That's not a legitimate question. But is this program done? And quite frankly, is Dabo Swinney done? And I know that sounds harsh, and I know it sounds like a rush to judgment, but every time he talks, he sticks his foot deeper down his mouth. I mean, that statement a couple of days ago, a week ago, about the fans, what if we, they'll find out, what if we lost a couple of games? Well, he has now. They're going to have to fight for a bowl game, and this is just unbelievable when you think about it.
Yeah, and I think they're 4-4 for the first time since 2010 or 2011, when he was just taking over as interim head coach. And it really is an eye-popping look when you consider that Clemson was easily, along with Florida State, the favorite in the preseason in the ACC. And especially, Paul, Florida State, I believe, is going to have an argument for the number 1 ranking on Tuesday. But look at how Mike Norvell has done it. He has done it in the complete opposite way of what Dabo wants to do, which is grab some players from the portal to complement the players you have in-house and go win big. Keon Coleman, transfer portal, Michigan State. Jaheim Bell, transfer portal, South Carolina. He has put some pieces together to be a top 4 team in the country, and Dabo just won't do it. And he's going to be left behind if he doesn't embrace this model, because everyone else in his league is doing it.
Yeah, he had such a recruiting base too, and I think that's where he was winning. And I'm not suggesting that that's gone off the deep end. He's still recruiting well, but it's more difficult, and I think you have to be concerned. And I'm not taking anything away from what he's accomplished. I mean, the guy has won 2 national championships. He played for 4 national championships. He's been in the playoffs, 5 times, I think, Matt, maybe
5
more.
or 6. Yeah, I think it's 6.
And he's produced legendary talent, from Deshaun Watson to Trevor Lawrence to a million guys on the defensive line. But I don't know when I've seen someone really at the top of the game fall this dramatically, this quickly, and not really be like in their 70s or something, where all of a sudden you just hit that age and it's a crash and burn. I mean, this guy is barely 50, I think, and it's staggering to watch what has happened, and it seemed like it happened overnight, although I really do think this has been trending now for a couple of years.
Well, because look, even going back to Taj Boyd, you have Taj Boyd, you have Deshaun Watson, and you have Trevor Lawrence, 2 players that you named. They're generational type quarterbacks. And when you have 2 of the best quarterbacks, if not the best quarterback in the country, surrounded by some other talent, things are going to go well. When there's a gap in quarterback play, DJU had a moment, transferred off to Oregon State. Cade Klubnik, I believe, was the number 1 rated dual threat quarterback in the country. And it just hasn't taken. And so Clemson being if you ask me to list surprises going into November, Clemson being 4-4 is easily at the top of that list.
But you juxtapose Dabo Swinney and really the nemesis that he had really from 2015 through 2018. That they played 3 or 4 times in the playoffs, a couple of times for the national championship. But Nick Saban, without that generational quarterback this year, has cobbled a team together that is on the precipice of one of the biggest games of the year, and with a win sets himself up for a dramatic run. And and then you measure that against Dabo Swinney, and quite frankly, I think the conclusion is that Nick Saban is just a far superior coach, who even at 72 this week is adaptable, where Dabo in his 50s is not. And And I think that's the message of two of the really most interesting stories of this year, and have been of every year. One guy, the older guy, who doesn't need to do anything else, who's already proven himself with 7 titles and 6 at Alabama, tweaks and changes and whether he doesn't embrace the portal or NIL, but he manages with it. And Dabo Swinney, who looks like the old man screaming at the kids to get off his lawn.
I will be curious as we wrap up here on this final Sunday of October. I will be curious in the offseason if there are conversations amongst him and his administration, like, hey, coach, like you've been left, you need to start adapting to this world, because if not, you're going to be left behind, and that would force us to leave you behind for a guy that's brought Clemson into one of the great national powers in the college football playoff era, which would be
what a conversation insane. That would be. I'd like to hear it.
I know. I would love to have the cameras in that one. I cannot wait for next Sunday, because we're going to have the rankings. We're going to have Alabama, LSU. We're going to have Bedlam in Oklahoma State. It's why we do this show. It's going to be so much fun. For Paul Finebaum, another long day. I'm Matt Barrie. Thanks for watching us here on the ESPN College Football YouTube channel. Give me something I can feel.